In Australian politics, 1983 was a year of decisions for voters and politicians alike. Voters made the biggest decision of all, a change of government here in Canberra, and that had immediate repercussions. This became the year Tasmania didn't dam the Franklin, the year a federal Labor government gave ground on uranium, the year of so-called consensus politics. But most of all, by any standards, it was the year of Bob Hawke. Brisbane, February 3rd. Bill Hayden steps down as ALP leader rather than have the party racked by a leadership battle with Bob Hawke.
I am not convinced that the Labor Party would not win under my leadership. I believe that a drover's dog could lead the Labor Party to victory.
At almost the same instant, in Canberra, Prime Minister Fraser calls an early federal election. Bob Hawke took over the ALP leadership unopposed. His campaign bandwagon was set in motion, and on February 20th, there was an omen of things to come. Labor won the state election in Western Australia. Hawke had campaigned alongside the new Premier, Brian Burke. Malcolm Fraser had been shunned by the outgoing Liberals. In the federal campaign, this one exchange was to be crucial.
I wonder how many of all of you have savings locked away in the banking system where you think it's safe. It would be safer under your bed.
But they can't put them under the bed because that's where the commies are.
During the campaign, Malcolm Fraser became Australia's second longest serving Prime Minister. But this was to be his last hurrah. When voters had their say on March 5th, Bob Hawke and the ALP were swept to power with a 25-seat majority. The Fraser years were over.
People of Australia who voted for us, and I want to tell all the people of Australia, however they voted, that it's a government for all the people.
I take total responsibility for the conduct of that election. I therefore take total responsibility for the defeat of the government.
Within a month of taking office, Bob Hawke brought together many of Australia's political, business and union leaders for the National Economic Summit, agreeing on the need to fight unemployment as well as inflation, agreeing too on the need to hold down wages and the federal deficit. But what did it really achieve?
What it did was give the government a universal credibility. It did line up all sections of Australia behind the government from the start, and that gave them a flying start, which otherwise they wouldn't have had.
In May, a mini-budget and an immediate row with airline pilots over plans for increased tax on lump sum superannuation. But the Hawke government's first real crisis centred on a Soviet diplomat, Valery Ivanov, expelled from Australia late in April, accused of being a KGB agent. ASIO evidence indicated Canberra lobbyist and former ALP official David Combe may have been compromised by the Russian. Prime Minister Hawke blacklisted Combe from further contact with federal ministers.
I certainly feel great bitterness towards some members of it. My livelihood has been effectively stripped from me.
With his government's credibility at stake, Prime Minister Hawke set up a royal commission to probe the Ivanov affair, ASIO's involvement and the complaints of David Combe. Mr. Hawke himself testified. Another witness, former Combe client, Laurie Matheson. Most of the testimony was heard in secret. But the issue remained in the headlines, dogging the government, and on July 14th, Special Minister of State Mick became another casualty, forced to resign after admitting he'd leaked details of a cabinet discussion to another Canberra lobbyist. 5 months later, the outcome of the Royal Commission, and the only real loser was David Combe. Justice Hope damned him, saying some of his evidence was deliberately false and that Ivanov intended to use Combe to gather information for the Soviet Union. Of Mick, no finding on whether he'd broken the law, but a rap over the knuckles for a disclosure which gave rise to a real danger of significant damage to national security. Young is to be restored to Cabinet. And on ASIO, the Hope report generally upheld its conduct. Combe was left out in the cold. There were other security-related controversies. In November, a bungled training exercise by masked and armed agents of ACIS at Melbourne's Sheraton Hotel led to the resignation of ACIS chief John Ryan. Traditional allies Britain and the United States voiced concern when the Falklands warhorse HMS Invincible was refused dry dock facilities in Sydney because she may have been carrying nuclear weapons. Air Force jets made embarrassing spy flights over Tasmania at the height of the Franklin Dam row, but in July, the Hawke government won a landmark High Court decision that effectively stopped the project. Mr Hawke's victory on uranium policy, however, came at the expense of another minister. Immigration's Stewart resigned from cabinet rather than support the decision to allow mining at South Australia's giant Roxby Downs site. Despite left-wing opposition, Mr Hawke also got caucus approval for 2 new export contracts. The ALP's uranium policy remains ambiguous and sure to cause more internal friction in the coming year. It was federal uranium policy and Ayers Rock land rights for Aboriginals that allowed Northern Territory Chief Minister Paul Everingham to demolish Labor in a snap election on December 3rd. But in Queensland's October poll, the Liberals did their own demolition job, toppling leader Lou Edwards and replacing him with Terry Wright, who voted with Labor on a public accounts bill. With the coalition torn apart, some saw a chance for Labor's Keith Wright to fill the vacuum, aided by Bob Hawke. But Premier Bjelke-Petersen confounded the pundits, and Nationals won power in their own right for the first time, helped by 2 surviving Liberals who switched sides. On the economic front, the Hawke government generally won high marks for its first budget that aimed for a deficit of just over $8,000 million. Pensioners, though, were dismayed by the prospect of a new income and assets test, a decision that commentator Reid believes will become an electoral handicap.
A lot of damage could lie ahead because Australians, unfortunately, have lost the habit of looking after their old people, and they expect their old people to be looked after by government. So it's not just the pensioners, it's the family of pensioners as well.
Assets tests aside, Bob Hawke's public opinion rating remains incredibly high. And in travels overseas, he's carefully cemented relations with the United States, eased the fears of ASEAN neighbours about ALP policy on Vietnam, and maintained our bonds with the Commonwealth. Amid such high-profile hawking of the Prime Ministership, opposition leader Andrew Peacock did capture some headlines when he married longtime companion Margaret St George. But politically, he's been very much the bridesmaid.